our guest tonight could be called a pirate, has been called a pirate, and a terrorist, and probably a lot of other things. But I suspect that Captain Paul Watson uses those terms and those names as a badge of honor. That's how he is seen in the eyes of his opponents, and there are a bunch of them out there. I'm sure that a lot of you folks have questions and comments, and we'll get to some of them in this hour. So stick around with more of our conversation about the health of the oceans, or lack thereof, with Captain Paul Watson. We'll be right back. Paul Watson today on a social media platform. I saw this cool video that someone sent me of dolphins surfing. They're just surfing along on a wave for probably the same reasons humans do, just for fun. I can't imagine there's a better ambassador species for the oceans than dolphins. How well have you get to know them? What can you tell us about them?
Well, we work to protect dolphins all over the world, and especially we're very much involved with trying to stop the killing of dolphins and pilot whales in the Faroe Islands, where it's being done just for amusement, for entertainment, really. And that's the kind of mentality that we're dealing with right now. But, dolphins are also an indicator species. A healthy dolphin population means a healthy ocean. And one of the things that people don't realize about whales and dolphins is just how extremely intelligent they are. And, the average, the human brain is approximately about 1,700 cubic centimeters, but the orca brain is 6,000 cubic centimeters. The sperm whale brain is a 9,000 cubic centimeter brain, largest brains to have ever evolved on the planet. And the convolutions on the neocortex area are so far more pronounced. And plus they have four lobes to the brain compared to the 3 lobes of most other mammals, including ourselves. Now, I was debating a whaler one time, and he said to me, "But Watson, you say that whales are more intelligent than people. How can you say such a stupid thing?" And I said, "Well, I measure intelligence by the ability to live in harmony with the natural world, and by that criteria, whales and dolphins are far more intelligent than people." And he said, "Well, by that criteria, cockroaches are more intelligent than people." And I said, "George, you're beginning to understand what I'm trying to tell you." And the fact is that is, to me, the mark of intelligence, the ability to live in harmony with your environment. But the thing is that the intelligence of a cetacean is different than ours because we measure intelligence by hand-to-eye coordination, by the manipulation of tools. If a blob of protoplasm steps out of a spaceship with a ray gun, well, automatically it's intelligent. We know that because we can see the technology. But we don't understand non-manipulative intelligences that do not require technology, but still are far, far superior to us in terms of communication abilities and navigational abilities and things like that. So there's a lot that we need that can learn. I mean, the English language has 400,000 words to it, but the humpback language has about 2 million vocal components to it, a far more complicated language than ours. But because we don't understand it, we just completely dismiss it. But I believe that through the use of computers and AI, possibly, that at some point we'll be able to speak with them. We'll be able to understand the language, and when we do, I don't think we're going to be too happy to hear what they have to say about us. But I do believe that's a possibility.
I've read these stories about amazing dolphin-human interactions, times when humans have saved them from bad situations, and times when they have saved humans. Despite all that we have done to them. Have you had any direct encounters like that with dolphins where they've demonstrated something to you, or stories that you're aware of human-dolphin interaction that our audience needs to hear?
Well, one of the strangest and most amusing things that I witnessed is way back in the 70s, there was 2 captive dolphins, Kia and Puka, in Hawaii, at the University of Hawaii. And the keepers of those dolphins allowed us, because I was with Greenpeace at the time, they allowed our crew to come in and, see the dolphins. And 3 of our crew, one a musician, another one a whale scientist, and another one of the crew members, got into the pool with this one dolphin called Kia, and very aggressive dolphin. And the trainer said, no, that dolphin's too dangerous. I mean, he's going to be aggressive, and don't go in there. But they were dolphin experts. We're going to go in there. We're going to play music. We're going to relate to the dolphins. Well, as they were doing that, suddenly the musician turns like pale white and slowly begins moving towards the side of the pool. What had happened is that dolphin had gone underwater and seized both his testicles in her teeth and walked them to the side of the pool. Completely severed them. But that was her way of saying, "Get out of my pool." I mean, How incredible is that she could do that and know where to go and how to do it and just how much pressure to apply.
I understand the lure of swim with the dolphins at these places around the world where they have these features. I understand why people would want to go to some place like SeaWorld and see these amazing animals up close and see them interact with trainers and things. But gosh, after blackfish, it's hard to be comfortable with that sort of thing. I know we had here in Las Vegas, we had a dolphin exhibit. The number of dolphins that died was too much. They just closed it down a couple of months ago. And I can tell you that I went to that. I met with the folks who worked there. They were very professional. They loved those animals. They did everything they could to save them, but there's no getting around it. They were living in a cement pool in the desert, and even after they shut it down and sent the dolphins elsewhere, I think at least one of the dolphins died anyway. It's a sad thing. We love them to death in those kind of situations.
It's a form of slavery. There's right now there's 53 orcas that are in captivity and hundreds of dolphins that are in captivity, and they're there for the sole purpose of making money for their owners, really. So it's a form of slavery, and these animals live miserable lives. The tragic thing about dolphins is they have a perpetual smile, but that certainly is not what they're feeling. In a lot of ways, to train them, what I found from talking with trainers is that they keep them, they're almost half starved because the hungrier they are, the higher they'll jump, or the more they'll perform the tricks. And it's a tragic situation. We have no right to enslave this species and force them to do things for our amusement. We just simply shouldn't have that right.
Emperor penguins, one more species that we'll talk about, and then we'll take some calls. Emperor penguins, again, we don't like to talk about what's happening to the planet, but boy, they're so such interesting little animals, and they're in pretty big trouble.
They are, and all penguin species are. One of the most interesting experiences I ever saw with the emperor penguins was Christmas Day of 2002. We were at the French research station in Antarctica when we saw hundreds and hundreds of young penguins. They just had coming to the sea for the first time, and they were walking for miles and miles across the ice until they got the edge on the ice. And they suddenly stopped at the edge of the ice and looked into the water, and you could see that they did not want to go into that water, and they would back off, and then they'd approach the water again, and then they'd back off. And this went on for about 20 minutes until one of the penguins stumbled and fell into the water. And then they all just jumped into the water. One of them had to fall in first. And it was one of the most amusing things I'd ever seen because they just started tumbling into the water, and they were fine. But it really showed they were really hesitant to go into that water when they first approached it.
And the danger to them now, the peril they're facing, is because of loss of habitat.
Loss of food, the krill that they feed upon, and that's being diminished. But it's also loss of ice. The ice which they depend upon the ice is becoming less and less every year. They're incredible species. I remember I was doing an interview for Whale Wars on Animal Planet, and there's about a dozen king penguins, and they were about 200 feet away. And we didn't want to disturb them, so I did the interview with them in the background, about 200 feet away. And as I'm doing the interview, they started approaching. They kept coming closer until when I finished the interview, they're all standing all around me looking at the cameras.
That's amazing. Let's take a call or two. On the wildcard line, Myad in New York. Good morning, young lady. How you doing?
Good morning, gentlemen. What a fascinating guest and program. I have a couple points of clarification and then my brief multi-part question, and I'll listen for those answers over the air. But, George, do you have an archive of your Nats News for those of us who don't want to be distracted from the program and get on the computer? So that's my question first to you, is can we get your Nats News on an archive, or will you consider doing that?
Yeah, they put it on the Coast to Coast website. So all the articles that we post for the shows when I host it, they're on there. and the regular news, and then along with all the bumper songs and everything, if you want to check those out. But yeah, it's on the Coast to Coast AM website.
Captain Cole, first I want to clarify if there is a book to read about your adventures or something that would give us the larger scope that you're given. Have you done a book, or are you contemplating doing a book?
I've done quite a few books, actually. One of them is just released this month called Hitman for the Kindness Club. But I also have done children's books and history books and that, so about 15 books altogether. But
I'm looking forward to that. But I want your thoughts on, first I heard a radio documentary, and there's a book attached, but I can't say the title and the author, where a certain type of crab, and I can't remember the exact species of it, but being used to create vaccines and somewhat devastated in terms of their survival and population. The second part deals with, and that was on a WNYC NPR. The second was on whales and whaling. And what was so fascinating, we forget about the history of using whales for oil, for kerosene, for all kinds of products that they explained about, including some substance. I think one name for it is amber, sometimes found on beaches from some regurgitation of the whale. So I'm particularly interested in that because it's very valuable. And the last part was a TV documentary that dealt with someone who thought he had invented a way to sweep up that huge patch of plastic that's all together somewhere, I can't remember the details, in the ocean, and he had invented some big idea but didn't quite work out. So if you have my questions, and I'll be looking forward to reading some of your work, I'll listen over the radio. Thank you, George.
Okay, that's quite a bit to chew on there. You want to tackle those, Paul?
Yeah, she was referring to horseshoe crabs, which are heavily exploited for medicinal reasons, pharmaceutical reasons. They actually have a blood that's blue. It's blue blood, and it has a lot of properties that the pharmaceutical companies are exploiting. So that's what she was referring to there. She was also referring to this scheme or campaign to get plastics from the oceans. But I think although a lot of money was invested in it, it didn't actually work. But there are a lot of people all around the world who are retrieving plastics, primarily from the beaches and that, but also going out and getting it from the ocean and trying to, get it out of the ocean and to try to recycle it and everything. But I think she's also referring to that giant floating island of plastic. Is there only one, or is there more than one? Well, there's numerous, but they're not actually floating. They're called gyres, but they're there, but they're beneath the surface. You don't really see it as you go through. You actually have to go a few meters below, and it's sort of circulating in the currents and everything. But you won't actually see an island of plastic, but it is there, and it can be the plastics can be removed. What was her other question? I think we covered the big ones. But regarding your book, so we have a link on the Coast to Coast website to Paul's Foundation. We're going to be talking a little bit more in our final half hour about how you can get involved in that. But if you want to look on Coast to Coast, you can find a link to the Captain Paul Watson Foundation and what it does. And it lists his books, his various books there. And he's got a bunch of them that are pretty good. We'll go to west of the Rockies, Howard in Vancouver. Hi, Howard.
Thank you, George. I have a question for Captain Watson. I recently heard that the Japanese were releasing radioactive water from the Fukushima plant. I'm not an expert, but it doesn't sound good to me. I just wondered what your opinion was. Well, it's not a healthy thing to do, that's for sure. And Japan has been desperately trying to get rid of that water, and so they're dumping it. And, here's the thing about Fukushima. There's so much about it that just
we don't know anything about. It's not even in the news. It's just sort of like glossed over all the time. But it's a toxic situation, and you just don't dump radioactive water into the sea without consequences. But that's what they're doing.
Man, we dump so much stuff into the ocean. I was reading about massive piles of DDT. Once it was outlawed, that Southern California, I don't know if it's government or what, but they took all these gigantic stockpiles of DDT barrels and they dumped them in the ocean near Catalina, which is, a pretty interesting place to just dump it. It can't be good.
No, and those barrels are corroding and they're releasing the chemicals. And it's not just DDT. They've also dumped incredible amounts of munitions and toxic chemicals. For some strange reason, back in the 50s and 60s and everything, they thought that the ocean would be the ideal place to get rid of the garbage. I don't think anybody anticipated that, metal drums will disintegrate. They will, release what was in them. And that's starting to happen more and more.
Oh, my gosh. Well, there are a lot of the phones are almost full here. But I want to ask you one thing. We got about 2 minutes before we go to a break here. It's about these projections of ocean currents. What's happening now? I mean, ocean currents, without those moving around, my gosh, that's a big problem. You've read those projections, right?
Yes, and when you get fresh water being melted off the glaciers of Greenland or in the Southern Ocean and everything, the fresh water itself is a major disruptor of ocean currents because it forces fresh water goes to the bottom, salt water to the top. And so they can force the change. The biggest concern, I think, is if we change the Atlantic conveyor, which is known as the Gulf Stream. If that happens, there's going to be major problems. People forget that London and Paris are higher than the city of Ketchikan, Alaska, really. And that the only reason that they're relatively mild climate is because of the Gulf Stream. At the Scilly Isles, off the end of the British Isles, they actually have palm trees because of that. If you shut down the Atlantic conveyor, it would be a severe disruption of worldwide weather patterns.
But that's what it looks like is happening. Or there are at least some projections that is going to happen.
It is a possibility. I wouldn't say that it's a definite thing, but it is a possibility, and I think scientists are taking it seriously.
We're talking with Captain Paul Watson of the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. We're going to get into, in the next segment, take a lot of your calls, but also talk about how he set this up, what work it does, and how you might be able to help. Much more to come here on Coast to Coast AM. We'll be right back. Jacques Cousteau is one of two people to win the Jules Verne Award. The other person is my guest tonight, Captain Paul Watson. We're going to learn a little bit more about the Captain Paul Watson Foundation in our next segment. You can sign up there. If you've got the link on the Coast website, you can sign up for a free newsletter to get news about not only what the foundation does, about ocean issues and animal protection, things of that sort. Check that out when you get a chance. We're going to go to the phones here when we come back in our final segment with this guest on Coast to Coast AM. Paul, before we go back to the phones, tell us about the foundation. You've started from scratch, I guess, just earlier this year. I mean, you built up sort of a navy for Greenpeace, a navy for Sea Shepherds, and now you're starting all over. How's it going?
Oh, it's going good. It was a year ago. I had nothing. I was ousted from the organization that I founded because I was considered to be too controversial. But a lot of people came with me, and we got our first ship. We did our first campaigns. We're growing steadily, and I haven't changed. I'm continuing to do everything that I've done for the last 45 years. It's just the organization that I founded decided that they didn't want to go that way anymore. And but I'm not going to be deterred by it. I think that we'll build it up again, and we're on that path. We're going along very well. And we're just getting our second vessel. We're also looking at getting a vessel into the Amazon to protect the river dolphins there. So I'm quite happy with the support that we're getting. But of course, we have to build it up. It took me 40 years to build up Sea Shepherd, so I have to start all over again.
Wow. And I mentioned about the newsletter. That's one of the ways that people can help. What other kinds of things can they do?
Well, people can sign up for our newsletter, and we'd like to get people to become monthly donors because that gives us the security for our ships and our operations and that. And you can go to the Captain Paul Watson Foundation website or find us on social networks. And I think that we're a unique organization because what we do is we focus on direct intervention, which I call nonviolent aggressive intervention. And we focus against illegal activities. We're not out there protesting anything. We're trying to stop people who are committing crimes.
I guess it's going to be harder if they're calling it the Captain Paul Watson Foundation, it's going to be harder to boot you out of it this time.
That's right. That's actually why I named it that, because I think I learned my lesson on that. But you know what? They're actually trying to take that away from me. They're trying to sue me, saying that my name is too closely linked to what they call their brand, and therefore is causing irreparable damage to their supporters. This happens with organizations. They get big, they get successful, and suddenly you get taken over by the lawyers, the fundraisers, the accountants, and everybody who's doing everything except being out on the ocean actually doing the job. So at least the people who came with me are the people who are quite willing to go out on the ocean to do the job.
All right. We're going to Janet in Manhattan on the wild card line. Hey, Janet, what's on your mind?
Hi, yes. I'm wondering about the coral reefs. I'm very curious. I don't have a picture in my mind of what they're really like. Now, I know the Great Barrier Reef, is it, hundreds of miles long or thousands of miles long? But I'm curious about how wide is it? In other words, if you go down to the shore at Australia, let's say, how far would you have to wade or swim to reach the coral reefs? And once you got there, how wide is it? Is it yards wide, miles wide? And how do they exactly provide? I understand they provide a habitat for other sea creatures, and the destruction of the coral reefs will result in the death of other creatures. Could you describe that habitat? Is that a symbiotic relationship they have with other creatures? And talk a little bit about that.
Well, the Great Barrier Reef of Australia is one of the natural wonders of the world, hundreds of miles long, many, many miles wide. Sometimes it's closer to the coastline, sometimes it's further off. The problem with that is that as warming waters cause bleaching of the corals, and a good percentage of the Great Barrier Reef has already been bleached. But the other thing was the introduction of alien species, particularly a type of crown of thorns starfish, which then eats the coral. And the Great Barrier Reef is under tremendous stress, but as are all coral reefs around the world. And it's predicted by 2030 that most of the coral reefs around the world will no longer be there. But coral is resilient, and we're finding that it's reestablishing itself in cooler and deeper waters. And I'm sure it'll survive, but it's certainly going to be a long haul. Now, these coral reefs, of course, provide an incredibly diverse ecosystem for literally thousands and thousands of species, everything from invertebrates up to fish to the seabirds and the great whales. So they're essential ecosystems, and they're deeply, deeply being threatened.
Oh, boy. First-time caller Bob in Kansas City. Hi, Bob. You're on with Captain Paul Watson.
Okay, Captain Watson, I got a question for you. I heard George ask you if you ate fish or not, and you said no. My curious question is, are you a vegan?
Not only am I a vegan, but all the ships that I've had and operated since 1990 have all been vegan. Prior to that, they were vegetarian.
Well, that's awesome. I think that's great, and I want to wish you good luck on your endeavors from here forward. Thank you for doing what you do.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. We're going to try Neil in Santa Monica, California. Hi, Neil. You're on with Captain Paul Watson.
Hey, how you guys doing? Bless you, Captain Watson. You and Gary Yourofsky are true heroes in my book, and you know who that is, I'm sure. This is author of The Conscious Planet. I have 7 chapters on endangered species, including one on overfishing or endangered fish. What's significant is that besides overfishing, what's significant is that we grow 10 times more crops for livestock. I'm a vegan, of course, and we grow 10 times more crops for livestock than what people eat. This excess agriculture is causing excessive amounts of fertilizer to work its way into the ocean, which is causing hundreds of square miles of dead zones, which also cause massive amounts of methane gas. to be formed, which traps 84 times more heat in the atmosphere than carbon. So this is a serious problem, and people need to be aware of that. That a vegan diet is going to help solve a major amount of this problem besides the overfishing. Thank you very much. And also, hemp plastic will solve the problem in the ocean also. Thank you. Bless you.
Well, thank you. I agree with all that.
Appreciate it. We're going west of the Rockies. Catherine in British Columbia. Hi, Catherine. You're on with Captain Watson.
Oh, hi, George. Thank you for taking my call. I'm so curious to know what you think about the blue algae. It's really bothersome to me, and I just want to know your take on the blue algae.
What blue algae? What where it's being invasive or where it's being natural? I'm not really sure what you're referring to.
Is she still there? Catherine? Not sure what she meant there. Do you? Is there some toxic blue algae she was referring to? I'm not sure what that is.
I'm not aware of that. I do know that there's toxicity because of red algae, which is these algae blooms which kill off fish, and that's primarily a big problem off of Florida. But I'm not familiar with any problems with blue algae, which I usually is associated with freshwater.
Okay. On the wild card line, Al in Mississippi. Hi, Al. You're on with Captain Watson.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
Okay, I didn't know if you could hear me or not. Love both of you guys. I looked a while back online, and the plume from Fukushima, the plant itself, the one that the Japanese didn't really do a whole lot about leaking into the ocean, it's almost to California, and the California tuna happen to migrate there 7 times a year right off the coast of Fukushima, and so do the Alaskan salmon. And the FDA doesn't seem to be getting all excited about it. Maybe you can put your 2 cents in.
Well, I think that is certainly a threat. You don't just put radioactive materials into an ecosystem without having some sort of consequences. And, the FDA doesn't do a lot about a lot of things, but I do think it's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't seem it's dropped off the face of the news media here. We rarely hear anything about it anymore.
Well, one of the problems you have with the media is that the people who own the media are the same people who own the corporations who are causing the problems.
Yeah, I suspect that is the case. We're going to Andrew in Indianapolis. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, George. Hey, Captain Watson. Captain Watson, you are just an absolute, I don't know if I can say this, badass. I used to host watch parties of your show when you were on the Discovery Channel back in the day. I was just wondering, is there a reason that we don't see much of Sea Shepherd on mainstream TV anymore?
Well, on the Whale Wars show, you don't see it anymore because we actually want that, and the Japanese are no longer in the Southern Ocean, no longer killing whales down there. They may return, but for now they're not there, so you can't do a show if they're not there. But I think the show was very successful in focusing attention on what they were doing, and that helped towards ending it. And you're not hearing as much about Sea Shepherd anymore is because the people who are in charge of Sea Shepherd, the people who ousted me from the organization, have decided that they want to be more diplomatic. They want to work with governments. They want to do things less controversial, less confrontational. And that just simply doesn't attract, the attention. It doesn't get people very fired up about it. And that's why I'm continuing to do what we always have done with the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. We believe in direct intervention. We believe in direct action. We also believe in doing it within the boundaries of the law and within the boundaries of practicality and without hurting anybody. But I think that the people who engineered my ouster had decided that they wanted to go in another direction. And I don't think that they're going to gain a lot of support by setting that course.
Did they or Greenpeace, did they declare you to be a terrorist or allege that you're a terrorist? Is that the term that somebody used?
Well, the funny thing about that was that many years ago I was doing a talk show in Vancouver when somebody called in a bomb threat to protest my violence, which I thought was somewhat amusing. And we had to evacuate the building. And as a bunch of reporters were interviewing me, and one of the reporters came up and said, "Greenpeace has just called you a terrorist. What's your response?" And I said, "Oh, well, what do you expect from the Avon ladies of the environmental movement anyway?" Well, they've never forgiven me for that. But the fact is I've never injured anybody. So when people ask me, "Are you an eco-terrorist?" I said, "No, never worked for Monsanto."
Anybody ever injured who worked with you on these ships? Did they get slammed by whalers or something like that? Anybody get hurt who was part of your team?
No, not only have we never injured anybody, I've never had any of my crew members injured.
Did you see the? Obviously, you've seen this. Right at the beginning of COVID, this documentary film came out when everybody was sitting at home watching a lot of television. It was called My Octopus Teacher, and wow, that was a powerful little film. And I would have hoped that the lessons from that sunk in. I'm not sure that people even remember it, though, just a couple of years later. You must have seen it, right?
Yeah, it was a great film, a very highly educational film, and very enlightening. Yes, I thought it was a wonderful film.
Octopuses are just amazing, as we now know from that film, and other follow-up projects are just amazing. I mentioned at the top of the program, we found this article about an octopus's garden, this amazing octopus hotspot off the 80 miles off of Monterey Bay, where thousands and thousands of octopuses live and raise their kids. And I'm worried that just the fact that it's been discovered, even though it's by the Monterey Bay Aquarium folks, that just knowing that it's there invites trouble.
Well, hopefully the Monterey Aquarium will keep an eye on it and see that it's not exploited.
Is there a way to protect it? I mean, can you just put ships out there and sit over top of it and keep troublemakers away, or what would you do?
Well, National Marine Fisheries and NOAA, they have means of protecting it. One of the real problems, the U.S. waters are not really a problem. There's pretty good enforcement, but worldwide it is a problem. We have all the laws and rules and regulations we need to protect life in the ocean. The problem is we lack enforcement, and especially in international waters. But I wouldn't be too concerned about anything within the 200-mile limit of the United States. I believe that it'll be properly enforced.
I know for a lot of years the Japanese had a whaling fleet that they pretended that it was for scientific purposes, and they'd get permission from the International Whaling Commission to go out and really do some hardcore science, by killing these whales. Is that still going on? Are they still doing this?
They're no longer killing whales in the Southern Ocean, but they are killing whales off their own coast in Japan. All whaling worldwide now is restricted to the territorial waters of Japan, Norway, Iceland, and Denmark. So we're working on all of those problems, and we have been over the years. It's an ongoing process. But, my lifelong ambition is to eradicate whaling, and we're about 90% of that has been achieved. So we're continuing to put the pressure on. Next summer, we're going to be returning to Iceland to intervene against their killing of endangered fin whales, and I'm sure that's going to be a dramatic confrontation in that. But this guy has to be stopped. It's not Iceland per se. It's one man, this 80-year-old man named Christian Lawson, who's a modern-day Captain Ahab. He just loves killing whales. He's one of the wealthiest men in Iceland, but he just wants to continue killing whales, and nobody's going to stop him. But we intend to stop him.
And what do they do with it? They eat them?
They sell them to Japan.
So the Japanese eat them?
Yeah, the Icelanders per se don't actually eat a lot of whale meat, but there's two markets. One is the Japanese, and the other one is tourists in Reykjavik who want a whale steak. So that's a small percentage, but it's there.
Try to get one more call in. First-time caller Richard in Los Angeles. Hi, Richard. You're on with Captain Watson.
Hi, folks. This is one of the better guests that Coast to Coast has ever had, and I appreciate you bringing him on. Captain Watson, many, many years ago in the 60s, I worked at the Miami Seaquarium. Pretty much right out of high school as I wouldn't call myself a dolphin handler, I guess it was, and a diver. I became acquainted with a gentleman by the name of Rick O'Barry, who you probably know of. Rick trained the dolphins for the TV show Flipper, and later on in life became very much an advocate against the capture of dolphins and formed an organization called the Dolphin Project. Excuse me. Pardon me. No.
We got about a minute left here, Richard, so you better get to it.
Okay. I don't have a cough button. Have you been in touch with, or do you know of Rick O'Barry and his project, the Dolphin Project?
Yeah, Rick O'Barry's on our advisory board. He's been a longtime friend. I've known him for 40 years and very much support the work. We've worked together on opposing the killing of dolphins in Taiji, Japan, and other places.
Thanks for the call. Thanks to all of our callers there. And Captain Paul Watson, really appreciate you being here. Appreciate the work you're doing. We have the links on our website to yours, and I hope people will check out your foundation and help support it over the long run. Keep us in the loop.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's Captain Paul Watson of the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. And like I said, you can check out our links if you want to get in touch with him. Up next, Malcolm Robinson.